Good afternoon. At this point, we would like to get started, and I'd like to invite everyone to please stand as I ask Ms. LaToya Jeffers, Assistant Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Gender Affairs, to come forward and wish blessings on the proceedings this afternoon. Please rise.
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you this afternoon to thank you for this gathering, dear Lord. Dear Lord, we ask that whatever is done and said here this evening will be a blessing to each person who have gathered here. Dear Lord, we ask that you be in the midst of our session. We ask for your guidance. We ask, dear Lord, for your protection. And we ask, dear Lord, that when this is over, we will leave here feeling relieved. We will leave here feeling encouraged. We will leave here feeling inspired. Dear Lord, I ask that you bless those who are on their way. Keep us safe. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
The Honorable Hazel Brandy Williams, our Junior Minister for Health and Gender Affairs, to our Assistant Permanent Secretary, Ms. LaToya Jeffers, to the doctors, nurses, and medical professionals out in the audience and joining us via the World Wide Web, to our women, our mothers, our sisters, our friends, our supporters who are joining us here today in person and in solidarity via the internet. And of course to the men who stand by their sides. Ladies and gentlemen, to everyone joining us, it is my honor to wish you a warm good afternoon and welcome. The topic that we are going to be discussing tonight is touching on some of the most painful moments in the lives of our women and of course of our men. There are moments of sadness and of ongoing struggle and self-doubt. However, this evening, we are here to try and shed some light. We are here to shine light through the black cloud that sometimes seems to be hanging over these taboo issues of infertility and miscarriage. Welcome to all. Welcome to this discussion on lifting the weight of miscarriage and infertility. We hope to have an open discussion tonight. We hope that it will be informative and that we will leave with a renewed understanding and a sense of this issue that we are grappling with. The statistics alone tell us this isn't an issue that we are facing alone. In the United States, some 10 to 15% of couples are classified as infertile. This is actually a global health issue. It affects millions, according to the World Health Organization, 50 million couples around the world. And in terms of miscarriage, it's thought that 10 to 20% of known pregnancies do end in miscarriage. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not something that we talk about often. This is not something that is open for discussion in our everyday lives. But tonight, we hope to truly shed some light on this issue. I have 4 excellent panelists here this evening who are going to be discussing their various experiences with the issues of infertility and miscarriage. Dr. William Stones, Mrs. Stevie Byron, Ms. Jihan Williams, and Mrs. Dillian Bartlett. I'd like now to introduce the panelists one by one by reading their bios. Our panelists range from medical professionals to counselors to sufferers of pregnancy loss, infertility, and miscarriage. And tonight, we're encouraging everyone to listen and also to share your questions, your thoughts, and your feedback. I'd like now to read the bio of Dr. William Stones, who is our first panelist, who will be speaking to us this evening on infertility. Dr. Stones graduated in medicine in London, then undertook specialist training in obstetrics and gynecology. After 15 years of practice in the UK National Health Service and teaching at the University of Southampton Medical School, he held full professorships at the Aga Khan University, Nairobi, the University of St. Andrews, Scotland, and the University of Malawi, combining teaching and research with specialist medical practice and work on health systems and policy in the field of global reproductive and maternal health. He has been in private practice as an OBGYN specialist in Nevis since 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to our very own Dr. William Stones. All right, Dr. Stones, so now I'm seated. We're going to just have an informal conversation discussing a little bit about infertility and some of the questions that our audience member and even our panelists might have about infertility. So when you think of infertility, what is it and what are some of its causes?
Thanks very much, Joy, and thanks very much to the organisers and to Jihan in particular for involving me in this very interesting exercise this evening. I think we're all going to learn a lot. It's a big topic, and as you mentioned, it affects a huge percentage of couples in the world. I think the figure that I often quote is 1 in 6. I think you mentioned 1 in 10, which is a lot, is really the point. And it's a question of when could we really say that somebody or a couple has a fertility problem. Now, often that may not be completely clear. I think some people have an expectation that maybe as soon as they maybe start having sexual relations, they're going to get pregnant straight away, and maybe a period comes the next month, and they think, well, why am I not pregnant? But actually, nature is a little bit complicated, and especially women's biology is a little bit complicated, and things don't work quite so rapidly. So, statistically, it's said that if you take normal, healthy couples who don't have any medical issues at all, and they're trying for a baby, trying to conceive, typically around 80% will conceive after a year of trying. So actually, that means that 20% won't conceive even after a year of trying. And then when we take it to 2 years, maybe that goes down to something like 90 or 95%. And that's why, medically speaking, we often, when a couple maybe come along and have a discussion about fertility and why have I not conceived, often the answer is, well, hang on, just wait. And meanwhile, we might well make some healthy lifestyle recommendations. For example, we would definitely perhaps encourage the lady to start taking folic acid vitamin supplements, which are known to reduce the risk of fetal abnormality. And there may be other lifestyle issues like smoking, or particularly weight. Is both overweight and underweight can be a serious issue for many women. And then, of course, the men are not exempt in that there may be some male lifestyle factors that might be interfering perhaps with the likelihood of pregnancy, particularly heavy alcohol or smoking, which might require discussion. So it's really, we might say that the clock starts ticking a little bit down the line. There may be special circumstances. For example, especially now we find many women have been perhaps postponing ideas of childbearing well into their 30s or even 40s. And then if somebody comes to have a conversation about fertility with me and they're 42, I'm not going to say, please go away and come back after 2 years. That may not be realistic, as the natural fertility does start to decline in the late 30s and into the 40s. So that age and other medical conditions, of course, can also be highly relevant.
All right, now, Dr. Stone, you did mention after around 1 year that, there might be a problem. So say this has been happening 1, 2, 3 years and couples have been trying and they're still not able to get pregnant. What are the next steps? What are some treatments that you recommend? What are the options? Should they just give up, or?
So the initial screening process would be hopefully identifying any obvious medical factors. So, for example, does a lady have regular menstrual cycles? Are there any difficulties in achieving satisfactory sexual relations? Are there any indications of any infections that could have been relevant? And then initial investigation, it's often useful to remember that the male does make rather an important contribution in this area. And overall, about 1/3 of couples who have a fertility problem, the problem is actually with the man. And this is often a very sensitive topic, and many is the time I've been in my office and this topic has come up with a couple, and the guy's face falls. And so often an early starting point in the investigation is actually to get a sperm count done, which is an easy test to do, but just a bit embarrassing for the guy. And that helps us to, first of all, rule out that a male factor could be involved, or if there is an issue with male, for example, a low sperm count or even absent sperm, then that can be further investigated, typically by a urologist.
All right. Now, earlier on, I heard you mention possible lifestyle changes. So, if a couple is trying to get pregnant, what are some of the lifestyle changes, and is there really a proven link between infertility and the food you eat and, having a few glasses of wine?
Right. So that's a great question, Jen. I think, Joy, I think we can say straight away the few glasses of wine is not an issue. Probably locally, I would say the biggest issue is being overweight. Unfortunately, a lot of people have had a tendency for weight gain, and I think we also have. It's not a simple thing just to say to somebody, "Oh, you need to be a bit slimmer, or you need to shed some pounds." But there is a link between certain hormonal changes and body fat. So, for example, there's a well-known condition which affects many women called Polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a combination of irregular menstrual cycles, a tendency to gain weight, and it's one of those conditions where somebody really does put on weight despite their best efforts. People do have a tendency to gain weight, and it can also be associated with difficulties conceiving. So, and even for people who don't have actual polycystic ovary syndrome, overweight is definitely and strongly associated with difficulties in some cases. And we also have to bear in mind that a number of pregnancy complications are much more likely to occur in people who are very overweight. So in terms of preparation for pregnancy, we could maybe say this is pre-pregnancy planning rather than treatment of infertility. A part of pregnancy planning is to have maybe shed some pounds and achieve a healthy body mass.
All right, now
It's easier said than done.
Yeah, very much easier said than done.
Strongly recognise that this is very much more easily said than done.
Now, I heard you say the H word earlier, and that's hormones. And, I know as women, we've all been through the hormonal changes, the time of the month. But I know also that a lot of women, at some point in our reproductive life, have taken some sort of hormonal replacement or oral contraceptive. And I've heard a lot of taboos and myths and sort of stories about if you take birth control, you won't be able to get pregnant. Now, is this true?
Well, if I had, Joy, if I had a few dollars for every time this topic comes up, I would be exceedingly wealthy. And actually, I have a whole seminar in this. When I'm teaching medical students and in our master's program that I've been involved in teaching in reproductive health, this is a massive topic. And I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the birth control pill. So you sometimes hear people saying, "Oh well, we're not sure. We don't know. Is the evidence there?" Well, actually, yes, there is the evidence on this one, and we have the mothers of those who took the birth control pill. We have their grandmothers. And the research is absolutely reassuring on that point. There's absolutely no link between use of oral contraception or the birth control pill and subsequent fertility problems. And I would like to actually really underline this because I fear that a lot of young women are actually unnecessarily deprived of the benefits of using oral contraception not only for contraception, but also for the non-contraceptive benefits of taking the pill, such as reducing menstrual cramps or reducing heaviness of periods. And this is really a serious issue for adolescents who may be really suffering with difficult periods and maybe having days off school or missing days of work and suffering pain which interferes with normal life. And perhaps mothers or other relatives say, well, oh no, you can't take the pill, it's going to mess up your fertility, and etc. Which is, to use the medical phrase, nonsense. And we must be very, very clear about that there is absolutely no link between use of hormonal contraception and subsequent fertility. Now, you will find many stories, and somebody will say, but I took it for 10 years, and then I really struggled to get pregnant, etc. And that really boils down to the statistics, that in any group of women, there's going to be a percentage of people who may have difficulty getting pregnant. It is definitely not due to whatever hormonal contraception they may or may not have used in the past. So I hope I can really underline that one, double underline it in red, because it's one of those, sometimes there are medical issues that we don't have the evidence about, and we have to say, well, we're really not sure, we think maybe this or maybe that, but this is not one of them. This is one of those ones where there's absolutely very clear, robust evidence, not from 5 years, 10 years, but from 50 years, more than half a century of experience of the birth control pill. So I really want to underline that point, because it does impact on really everybody in the community, not just those who may currently have a particular fertility problem, but really our whole attitude to using these methods.
And I'm sure out there in the audience we've all heard that as well. I know I've heard that. People warning me, don't use it and it'll damage you. So thank you so much for clarifying.
I would say it's not just an issue here or in the region. It's I had the exact same conversation in Malawi and in Kenya when I've been working there, and it's that myth is so deeply embedded.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Stones, you've worked with women. I mean, you just mentioned Malawi and Kenya, in the UK as well, and here in Nevis. And I'm sure you've worked with a lot of women who have gone through miscarriage and infertility. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the emotional and the physical impacts on these women? And not only the women, but also on, their families and on the men who are at their side as well.
Okay, I'll be a little bit reserved about that, because is it for me to comment on that?
I understand.
I'm not sure. I can say what do I see or what do people tell me, but I suppose...
Yeah. Or perhaps from a doctor's perspective, the physical impact on...
I would probably say we're going to hear more about that this evening. But I would just probably highlight the emotional burden of working or struggling with fertility and trying to deal with it. And I think it's one of these things where there are such emotional highs and lows. I mean, for example, a couple might be trying to get pregnant, very focused on what's happening in the menstrual cycle. Am I going to miss this period, or is it going to come? And then, for a day or two, it doesn't come, and there's a high hopes, and then it does come, and those hopes are dashed. So the emotional ups and downs and highs and lows, I think that's something that women really tell me about, and of course their partners who have to kind of do the consoling and the reassuring. And well, I hope they do that. I think sometimes some guys perhaps they make it very clear that I want to get my baby kind of now, and it's not particularly helpful and not particularly reassuring. But of course, the men have a role to play in helping people just be patient and navigate those ups and downs. And I think that gets much more intense in a situation where people have embarked on more complicated fertility treatments. So for example, like stimulation of ovulation or even in vitro fertilization. That is incredibly emotionally demanding, and the preparation for that is I think one has to really seriously prepare for the emotional ups and downs, and often there are many downs which are very tough for women. I don't know if you want me to touch on the miscarriage side of things. Or...
Yeah, absolutely. We'd like to hear a little bit about miscarriage as well. And for members of the audience, we will have a Q&A section at the end, so please feel free to hold up and store your questions as well.
Great. So just as giving that overview of infertility, or we could say subfertility, it's not necessarily that somebody can't get a baby, but it's just taking a bit longer than usual. we've realised that how common that is. Similarly with miscarriage, this is a part of reproductive life, unfortunately. And I think, Joy, you mentioned that statistic. Around 15% of recognised pregnancies will end in a miscarriage before 12 weeks. Now that, when I say recognised pregnancies, that reflects what we can do in terms of the technology that we have available. We have pregnancy tests, and your pregnancy test can go positive even before you've missed a period, just for those few days before you've missed a period. So it's a very powerful way of detecting a very, very early pregnancy, which was not accessible to us years ago, where perhaps somebody might miss a period and then they have a rather heavy period and they may not think very much of it, but actually maybe that was a very early miscarriage. And now we know that it is an early miscarriage because we're doing pregnancy tests. And similarly with ultrasound, with early pregnancy scanning, often we can identify the presence of a pregnancy fairly early on. And similarly, we can pick up pregnancies that are sadly failing in a way that perhaps would not have been evident beforehand. So we're probably much more aware of it medically than we were in the pre-ultrasound era. So giving somebody that diagnosis, again, it's not an easy thing. Perhaps people vary in their reactions, but it's a loss. And for some people, it actually represents, it's like a bereavement and has to be dealt with in that sort of way. And in general, we tend to assume that the more advanced a pregnancy is when we reach the point of miscarriage, the more distressing it's going to be. But I think in my experience, I would say it's not always quite that simple. There are people who can be extremely distressed from a very, very early loss, and maybe because perhaps they were pinning very many hopes on that very early loss, on that very early pregnancy. So it's not always a simple question of how many weeks. One has to really be aware of the whole circumstances.
Well, Dr. Stones, thank you. You've really given us a good and thorough medical setup. If there's one final thing that you'd like to say, a message you'd like to send to women out there who, might have been trying for a while, who might have lost a pregnancy, what message would you send?
I'd say that it's really perhaps one of the things that helps people is good knowledge and accurate knowledge and understanding as much as possible, because then it doesn't necessarily take the pain away, but perhaps having knowledge and understanding of what some of the processes can be a consolation. And then also I think people suffer or may have misunderstandings or misconceptions which are actually completely avoidable, and perhaps the one about the pill and I took the pill, I feel guilty because I took the pill and this is why this has happened, etc. It's just wrong, and that sort of thing can be dispelled by correct knowledge. So I would say seeking knowledge is always a good idea.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stones. All right, so we're moving on to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Mrs. Stevie Byron. Now, Mrs. Stevie Byron is a trained counselor. She works at the Nevis Care Center, that's also known as the Counseling Unit here on Nevis. Mrs. Byron received her bachelor's degree from the University of the West Indies and her master's degree in counseling from the University of Wyoming. She's worked in numerous clinical settings and has been in the field of mental health for over 12 years. She's very passionate about promoting psychological wellness in the island of Nevis and normalizing the pursuit of mental and emotional help to improve the overall quality of life. Let's welcome Mrs. Byron as we interact on our panel this evening.
Thank you.
So welcome, Mrs. Byron. Now, as a counselor, what kind of impact have you seen on the mental state of people who are suffering from infertility?
Thank you very much, Joy, for that introduction and for the welcome. As a counselor, I've recognized that even though we have come a long way in our society in terms of being open to talk therapy, which is basically what counseling is, a lot of individuals don't recognize the mental and the emotional aspect of something like infertility and miscarriage. So the mental and the emotional aspect usually goes unacknowledged to some degree, to a great degree.
Now, a lot of the time I've heard people say, just relax. Don't worry about it. Things will happen. Is that something that you would recommend saying to somebody? Does that make sense?
Not at all. I do not recommend saying that. And it's important to understand that they may say that to comfort, to encourage, to reassure. Usually, most individuals who hear that, they don't feel comforted. They honestly feel unheard and unsupported. So individuals who would want to encourage someone or support someone, there are different ways of doing so. You know, Jihan did an excellent job in pointing out in her book a number of ways family members, friends, community can support someone who is going through infertility and miscarriage. Now, one of the best things to do is to, one, acknowledge that individual's grief. Infertility and miscarriage is without a doubt very difficult, distressing, and a traumatic experience. And that individual who goes through those ups and downs, like Dr. Stones referred to, they usually feel alone and not understood. So it's important that we as family, friends, community, we give that individual space to express themselves. So they may say, you know, it's really hard. I'm having a very difficult time. When will it happen? And then someone may interject, oh, just wait. God is in control. Meaning well, but sometimes the best thing to do is to just acknowledge those emotions. Provide that space in which that individual can truly express their thoughts and their emotions. The reality is, it is a roller coaster of emotions. I would recommend everyone to read Jihan's book. It's very poignant and it's very raw in terms of the roller coaster of emotions an individual goes through. You may be excited and expecting the blessing of a baby, and then in the blink of an eye, you're going through frustration, anger, hurt, distress, you know, a range of emotions. And it is a roller coaster of emotions. And the best thing that we can do to support that individual is to just acknowledge those emotions. Let them know, hey, I don't know what to say. I am not certain how I can comfort you. I am here.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause. I think all of us, we are here. Definitely. Now, you spoke about, you know, the loneliness of suffering from infertility. And you spoke about it being very isolating sometimes, and that roller coaster. What kind of advice would you give to women out there in the audience or who are listening who are struggling with this issue of infertility? What advice would you give them? What would you say?
The first thing I would do is to first provide that space in which that individual can express herself. The reality is no two individuals are alike, and each individual who struggles with infertility and miscarriage, their experience is unique. Yes, they may feel similar emotions in terms of the anger, the frustration, the loss of control. It's so important that we recognize that each individual's experience is unique. And then after hearing that individual's experience and getting to know that individual, we personalize it, as in what works for that individual. It's first really important that that individual acknowledges her emotions. It can be hard to do. In counseling, one of my duties that I experience with individuals going through infertility or miscarriage is helping them to articulate their loss. It can be really difficult to put into words what they're feeling, you know, and it's okay to not be able to do that right away. It's important that we provide the space for that individual to find their best way to articulate what they're going through. Now, in terms of therapies, what Jihan did in her book, we consider that consider that as narrative therapy, storytelling. That was her way of expressing her experience, her way of trying to understand what she was experiencing. Now, someone else may be able to articulate their loss in a different way. So it's very important that we not necessarily cater, have a cookie cutter fit for every individual. It's so important that we figure out what works best for that individual. So there are different things that could help that individual in terms of being able to support them. One, the best thing to do is to help them to articulate that loss, and that takes time. And let them know that it's okay that it takes time. When they are in that space, when they can share, then they do so. One of the things I highly recommend is a wellness approach. It's so important that we look at an individual as a whole. In terms of infertility and miscarriage, and I think culturally too, it's very easy for us to look at just the physical. That is comforting, that is safe. In Jihan's book, she mentioned that, her blood pressure went up after the miscarriage, and she took medication, and it was difficult for her to get that down initially. So she was looking at the physical aspect. The reality is the mind and the body work together. And it's important that as individuals, we look at our lifestyle. So I believe in taking a holistic approach to individuals. Looking at our sleeping patterns. How well do we pay attention to sleep? Do we get enough sleep? 6 to 8 hours rest. And when we do, is it good? Is it really, do we feel really rested? Also, we look at exercise. That is one of the best medicines for any emotional challenge, whether it's anxiety, depression. And it's important to note that if individuals who are going through emotional difficulties because of infertility and miscarriage, if they don't address those emotional challenges, it can develop into postpartum depression, anxiety, not postpartum depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. So it's so important that we look at our whole lifestyle. So something like exercise is important. In terms of how we spend our time outside of work. Do we watch a lot of TV? Do we engage in activities that we find relaxing? So it's important that we look at the entire individual's lifestyle and take a holistic approach, because the mind and the body, they work together. And a lot of emotional issues, a lot of mental issues manifest itself in the body. So you may be experiencing tension in the neck, in the shoulders, stomach pains, and other physiological symptoms that you can't explain, and the doctor will tell you, physically everything's fine. And it's unfortunate, but usually I see individuals when they've exhausted all the physical options, and then they finally give in and say, okay, well, I'm going to address the emotional and mental aspect of it.
All right, Mrs. Byron, thank you so much. Now, I know you spoke about holding space and being there as listeners. And so right now, collectively as an audience, I'd like us to hold space for our next two panelists and be there to listen and support. Now, I know that both of you have experienced issues with fertility and child loss and miscarriage. Would you be able to share your stories with the audience? All right, I'd like to welcome. And please, let's give these ladies a round of applause for their bravery. It's not an easy thing to talk about your pain in this kind of a way.
Good evening, everyone. In terms of infertility, for me, I was trying to get pregnant for 4 years before it actually happened. I had pretty much resigned myself that it wasn't going to happen. I was going to be everybody's hot auntie and godmother, but then I don't know what happened. It just happened. And I think a lot of people credit it maybe to the pandemic when we were all home, stay-at-home orders. Maybe it was the absence of work stress and all these other things, but from in terms of infertility, having to deal with that, your period every month is like a stab. It really was a difficult time, and to some extent too, it still is a difficult time because I lost my son in 2020, and as soon as the doctor said go, I went and still nothing. So it's an ongoing thing for me.
Okay, good evening, everyone. For some years, I think we tried to get pregnant, maybe 4 years, as Jeanne said. But I was diagnosed with PCOS, and if everyone don't know what that is, it's an imbalance of your hormones. So I wasn't really, we were trying, but it didn't happen. And when it did happen, it happened a couple times, and then, miscarriages happened. But, I tried to push on, try different steps, different things to help the situation, lifestyle changes, listen to the doctor as to what he would say and explain what was going on with my body and so on. But yeah, that's me.
And I should say, I also have PCOS. I always make sure I say it right, not that I have it. It is something I'm dealing with. I'm not claiming it.
Amen to that. Now, I'm sure that both of you have had the question, when are you getting children? Why you don't have any children? Have you felt a lot of pressure from society, from your grandmothers, from your husband's side of the family, your boyfriend's side of the family, to have children? How has that impacted you?
From everyone. It came from all sides, all fashions, the comments, the conversations. Sometimes I smile and I nod, but what I felt inside, they didn't know what I really felt and what I was going through, the situations and so on. Some persons didn't even know I had all these miscarriages. But I would tell society to please be kind with your words, especially to women. You don't know what they are going through, and some persons, you don't know how they will take it.
Absolutely.
In terms of pressure, I'm happy we have different experiences on the panel, because I could imagine the pressure being a married woman and people wanting to know, well, you married, when you going to get a baby? Try being not married and 37, being a lawyer, and everybody's like, you have the life, you all you need now is the child, and I just used to be like, yeah, in time, and your mother need a grandchild from you, but she has 3 from my brother, she's okay.
Yeah.
And I just used to come up with all these retorts, and you try to act like, it's no big deal, but inside if that's what you want, it can really be hurtful. But I always acknowledge the fact that a lot of people don't mean anything bad by the question or the comment. It's just that we have to acknowledge that the reason why somebody doesn't have a child could be traumatic. The reasoning behind it could be traumatic. So it's like you ask the question, but probably don't ask the question, because the answer could really be very traumatic and triggering for the person. So just wish them the best. When they walk away, you could pray, Lord, please give her twins, please give her twins, please. You don't have to tell her, but your prayers to God may actually work. So it's as much as you want it for her, you wish it for her, recognize that it could be triggering and traumatic for a woman who doesn't have a child, or a woman who wants more children. So it's just something to be mindful of. So perhaps avoid the question and just silently wish her well and many pregnancies.
Yeah. Now, so we're close to ending our segment on infertility, which is, what we've really been focusing on for the first segment. We're going to talk a little bit more about miscarriage in the second. But for women who are struggling with infertility, just inability for a couple to conceive, what kind of message would you send out there? Maybe she hasn't said it to anybody. Maybe her whole family knows about it. Maybe her husband or her partner is getting upset with her about it. What would you say?
I think Mrs. Byron said it well. You need that space. You need somewhere where you could be honest and vulnerable and cry and abuse and whatever other emotion it is you're feeling. You just try and find that space where you can have that outlet. It might be an artistic outlet as well, but don't keep it inside. That would definitely be my advice. Don't keep it inside. I understand we don't want to necessarily look like we're falling apart to the world, so we might not come up on a stage and talk about it. Yeah. But if you don't have that space where you can really be open and honest about what you're feeling, I would encourage you to reach out to even online groups. There are lots of groups on Facebook that deal with infertility and pregnancy loss and these kind of things. Although, you're going with everybody is different. I don't like being bombarded with messages about it. But if you just need that space, know that there are spaces where there are other people who feel exactly what you're feeling. And hopefully the people around you understand what you're feeling as well. So yes, my advice is definitely find an outlet where you could just get it out, as raw, as rude, as vulgar, as honest as you wish. I wish you that outlet.
I agree with Jeanne.
All right, so panelists, thank you so much. That was our first segment, which was really focusing on infertility. And just to remind everyone, this is 10 to 15% of couples who suffer and struggle with infertility. 1 in 6, according to Dr. Stones, 1 in 6. Now, let's move on and talk about pregnancy loss. Now, pregnancy loss is something very personal. It's something that affects all of us. I remember when I was 3 years old, my little sister was born, and she was only born at 6 months, and she didn't survive. And so I remember, even as a small child, the emotions that my family was going through at that moment. So this is a very personal topic to many of us. So, Dr. Stones, what's the difference between a miscarriage and a stillbirth?
Thanks, Joy. I'd actually move it a little back a bit and introduce another word, which is a sensitive word, and I'm going to introduce it for that reason, which is the word abortion.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that is in traditional medical terminology, we talk about abortion, meaning a pregnancy loss. And then we can subdivide that into spontaneous abortion, which we would call miscarriage, and induced abortion, which is a procedure undertaken medically to end a pregnancy. So naturally, because it's rather a difficult word, we've moved away from that, and that's why now even in medical literature we talk about miscarriage, meaning the spontaneous loss of a pregnancy. And we find that in medical papers on the subject now, it's the norm to make that language distinction, just because otherwise it causes a lot of confusion and unnecessary distress. So, and for example, we talk about recurrent miscarriage. We don't talk about recurrent abortion, even in medical terminology these days. So, miscarriage, technically speaking, means the loss of a pregnancy which had established. And there are many sort of sub-varieties and subcategories which we probably don't need to go into, but it really refers to a loss of a recognized pregnancy. Earlier on I was mentioning that a lot of this has become, we now understand a lot more about what's happening in very early pregnancy just because of our ability to do pregnancy tests and ultrasound scans. So historically, a loss of these early pregnancy losses perhaps wouldn't have even been recognized. And there's even something which is sometimes called a chemical pregnancy, which means your pregnancy test went positive and then it went negative again, and maybe you didn't even miss a period. So there was a pregnancy there somewhere, but it didn't get to the point of really establishing. And so that's now the very earliest of varieties of miscarriage that we could refer to. So again, what about the later end of the scale in terms of weeks? So again, historically, there has been a tradition for us to classify miscarriage as a pregnancy loss up to 28 weeks. And then anything beyond 28 weeks we call a stillbirth. Now that is a completely arbitrary distinction. And the difference between a pregnancy that fails and is lost at 27 weeks and a pregnancy that fails and is lost at 29 weeks, from the mother's point of view, from the family's point of view, it's a bereavement. And whether we call it a miscarriage or whether we call it a stillbirth is really arbitrary. And there's nothing biologically underpinning that. It's really just something that's arisen historically from the way that we have recorded pregnancy statistics. It does have public health importance because, especially in probably the last 10, 15 years, the topic of stillbirth was actually largely neglected in the global public health discourse. There's a lot of emphasis on losses of babies after birth, neonatal mortality, and infant mortality. But the world had, in terms of public health policy and maternal health policy, there was quite a gap when it came to stillbirth. So there's been quite a big emphasis in recent years, so some very significant surveys and landmark publications that the medical world has taken notice of to try and say, okay, we actually are losing a lot of babies in late pregnancy. What can we do to reduce that burden of loss? And that's been a big focus. But now we can say perhaps now we haven't really been talking enough about miscarriage and all those people who are losing pregnancies at that earlier stage, but nevertheless suffering a considerable burden. I mentioned that there's a large natural, you might call it, rate of pregnancy loss up to 12 weeks of pregnancy, and those are largely thought to be pregnancies that are fundamentally not viable. So often there will be a chromosomal abnormality or some other developmental factor, which means that pregnancy actually can't go beyond a certain number of weeks. And the ending of that pregnancy is a very common phenomenon, as we said, around 15%. And that reflects a sort of fundamental biological process around the time of conception. But later pregnancy miscarriages, or tending towards what we might start to call stillbirth, often there may be some underlying condition involved, which these are much less common. And usually there may be some other factor involved. Sometimes, or very often, we still don't find an explanation. Somebody might lose a baby at 27 weeks or 26 weeks or 25 weeks. We may not necessarily find a medical explanation for that. But sometimes we do. Sometimes there is an underlying medical condition that we can address.
Yeah, well, that was my question, and I'm sure that's a burning question that we have. What causes this to happen? What causes pregnancy loss? What are some of the reasons why this happens?
So I'm going to focus more on the later miscarriages rather than, as I've said, the earlier ones tend to be ones which are, if you like, biologically not viable, and there's probably not. They were probably not amenable to medical intervention in the broad. Large numbers. There is a condition called recurrent miscarriages, which is women having 2 or 3 or more early miscarriages. And there are medical interventions that have been proposed for that to try and reduce the risk of losing in that very particular situation. But again, that's a very specific subgroup of women. So in later pregnancy losses, sometimes there's an issue of the mechanical ability of the cervix, which is the neck of the uterus, which holds the pregnancy in up till the time of labour. Sometimes that's normally a rather rigid bit of tissue that doesn't relax and doesn't allow the pregnancy to come out. And there is a condition of what we call incompetent cervix, which means that the cervix somehow just gives way. And that's a condition which can cause particularly late miscarriages around sort of 18, 20 weeks or so. And that one is one that we can treat for subsequent pregnancies by putting a stitch in the cervix, which is an intervention which it's one of those ones which I think it was a very old idea, and then people started to say, well, there's no evidence for this, and let's stop doing it. And then actually there was new research that said, well, yes, actually it does work. And the current status is in patients who clearly do have evidence of that issue, that particular issue, it does seem to be beneficial. So other medical conditions can be relevant, and particularly preeclampsia, which is the condition where you get raised blood pressure and protein in the urine. It usually happens later in pregnancy, but there is a group of women who tend to get it very early and very badly, and it can affect the development of the placenta, so that's another subgroup. So it's probably not the right place to go through a medical textbook. There's a long list of other things, other conditions that can be relevant, but probably those are the ones that I would highlight. Maybe perhaps we should say something about infections. That's perhaps another one that should. So conditions which cause high fever can trigger a miscarriage, not anything directly to do with the pregnancy, but just having a high fever. And in Africa, it's a very serious consequence of malaria, countries where malaria is common. Pregnancy loss associated with malaria is sadly very common. There are other viral infections which can be relevant, so things like rubella, which I hope we've all had our
boosters,
our MMR vaccine, and there are other viruses, herpes, cytomegalovirus, parvovirus, etc. Again, there's a list of viruses. None of these are particularly common, but they can be relevant in very particular cases.
All right.
So just to highlight.
No, thank you so much for that. Now, you've spoken about, some of the causes, but what about some of the things that women might be able to do? Is there anything that women can do to prevent pregnancy loss? I know we know about lifting heavy things and not eating raw fish, and, there are all these different sort of myths or realities, but what can women do to try and prevent this from happening?
Okay, so the hardcore medical evidence-based interventions for miscarriage prevention are very few. I've mentioned the general advice to be taking folic acid, preferably even before conception, and the reason for that is it reduces the risk of certain fetal abnormalities, which would again possibly lead on to miscarriage. But beyond that, the actual list is quite small. What else can we highlight? There are certain medications that we would not want to be taking, and those women who may be suffering from high blood pressure, certain blood pressure medications which are commonly used are not suitable for use in early pregnancy, and often that could be an issue in someone who has high blood pressure and is thinking of getting pregnant, that they may be well advised to change their blood pressure medicine to one which is sort of pregnancy friendly, of which there are a number of blood pressure treatment options which are not at all hazardous for pregnancy, but there are some which are not desirable. And then the general issues that we've been talking about in terms of well-being and a healthy lifestyle. The list of foods and things that one shouldn't be consuming is actually quite small. I think I take your point about the raw fish, and I think liver perhaps is not recommended because it's got too much vitamin A in it. What is it? Cream cheese? Soft cheeses. Yeah, which can carry a bacteria called Listeria, which is, but this is kind of very marginal stuff in terms of, especially in terms of Caribbean lifestyle.
Right. So basically you're saying there's not necessarily much that women can do, that a lot of it really is down to...
From a point of view of hard-boiled, research evidence-based interventions that really make a difference, I have to say that is true, yes.
All right. Now, pregnancy loss, thank you, Dr. Stone, so much. Pregnancy loss is something that's very personal, and I know that, among the many women that I know, I've hardly heard any stories about pregnancy loss. Now, Jian has written an incredible book about her experience, and I know that we heard about the writing of itself being therapeutic. Dillian and Jihan, would you be able to share your pregnancy loss story with the audience here today? And please, I'm asking everyone, please hold space for them and just let them feel your love and your support.
I usually take my space. Maybe that's my personality, but I talk to myself. I'm very good company. My story is essentially, what caused my miscarriage was fibroids. I had fibroids for quite some time. I knew about this, but I also know that having fibroids doesn't mean that you're going to have a miscarriage, because there are people who successfully have their babies with miscarriages. And I know lots of people around me who've had that experience. So when I found out I was pregnant, I really wasn't, I was not thinking about that at all. And my doctor wasn't concerned, so I wasn't concerned. Around the 5th month, I started experiencing pain in my pelvic area. And I was told that the fibroids were breaking down. Because now the baby and the fibroids are fighting for blood supply, and the baby is winning, so they're sort of being stabbed and breaking down. But in breaking down, they cause a lot of pain, and the pain got so intense that it triggered contractions. So for about 3 weeks or so, I was just having pain like contractions. But they were very few and far in between until in November 2020, it was just really intense one Thursday, and it continued into Friday, and then the Friday I started bleeding, so I went to the hospital. And I was in the hospital on Friday. They gave me medication to stop the contractions, because now I've been actually having contractions Thursday, Friday. Saturday, with the medication, it cooled down a bit. Sunday was good. I was looking at bassinets, because now I was told, you're at 26 weeks in your pregnancy. We're going to have to put you on bed rest. And we just want you to make it to at least 30 weeks. So I was thinking, wow, okay, this baby's gonna come earlier, so I'm in the hospital ordering stuff like crazy, talking to people, no big deal. And then the Sunday night, the pain just came like a storm. And it just kept intensifying, and then my water broke. And then went into the delivery room, delivered my son, and they said that he took a few breaths, but that was it. So, difficult experience, and because for me, my pregnancy was fine, I had fun, I enjoyed it. I was no sickness, no weird cravings. I was craving breakfast pancakes and hamburgers, which was weird, but it just was a real shock. I don't even really know how to put it into words. to be honest. But essentially, that's what happened. Fibroids, pain, baby's gone.
All right, audience, let's give our presenters a clap, please. Let's give them our support, our love. We are here for them. We are lifting them up. We share in their pain, and we are here for them.
I was married for 7 years. 7 years. Before that, my first pregnancy, that was in 2011. I didn't know. I knew about miscarriages and, pregnancy losses. My sister experienced it the year before, and, it was tough. But I never thought that I would have experienced, miscarriage. In 2011, that's when I first got pregnant, And when I did lose the baby, early on, I didn't really think about it much. It was something, okay, it happened, okay, move on, let's try again. But in 2013, I got pregnant again. And then early in the pregnancy, I lost the baby again. And I was like, okay then, something is wrong. Something got to be wrong. So we got some tests and so on and realized I had PCOS. I was experiencing all sorts of emotions and so on. I mean, I didn't know, I researched, and I realized I have all the symptoms and so on. And I said to God, well, if it's supposed to happen, it will happen. If not, well, I have 2 stepdaughters, I'm good. But at the back of the mind, you're like, okay, I want my own, But I am not saying it out front. I'm not putting it up there in the atmosphere, because if it doesn't happen, well, I don't feel bad. But I did feel bad. Yeah. So in 2016, I got pregnant again. And, I did all the things that the doctor told me to do. I tried my best and took medication, and we, the pregnancy was normal. We reached at a point of seven months, and I don't know, one morning I woke up, I was fine, but during the course of the day in July 2016, I started feeling pains, and I did not know what it was. I'm like, okay, I was doing a lot today, so maybe I needed to sit down, breathe, and get myself together. So I tried, and then I realized that it was not going away, and it intensified. And so I told my husband, no, this doesn't feel normal. I think we need to go to the doctor. But my doctor wasn't saying it, so I had to find somebody up here. So we went to the doctor, and we waited. And then the pain came in waves. And I finally got in to see the doctor. We did the ultrasound, and it was like, your cervix is opening. Your cervix is opening. And, rushed me to the hospital. We were there, and they said, you have to go on bed rest. You have to elevate your legs and, try to, keep everything in. That was on a Friday, I think. And so I spent the weekend in the hospital, and we tried everything. I was getting steroids, I think, just in case the baby came, to develop the lungs and everything. And so the pain went away. So I thought, okay, if I get up to, I think they were saying 26 weeks and then 30, you'll be fine. Baby can be born, and it can survive. And so I went into Friday, spent the weekend in the hospital, and by the Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, a pain came, and it was overwhelming. It was so overwhelming, I just did not know. All I could do was scream and flare, and they were saying, no, 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 but they rushed me to the theater. They rushed me to the delivery room, but I kept on pushing, but nothing was happening. They burst my bags, but then nothing came, nothing was happening. The pain was still there, so they rushed me to the theater, and the baby was born on the 18th of July, 2016. She was small, but she was alive. But she didn't survive.
Let's give her a round of applause, please. Ladies and gentlemen, these ladies are some of the bravest individuals that I know. Please, let's give them a round of applause for sharing their story, for sharing the story that many of our women have gone through in silence and, have carried their whole lives. Gian, what were the days and weeks and the months after this happened? What were they like?
A mix of things. I was visibly pregnant. Had a whole gender reveal party. So it's not like people didn't know I was pregnant, and then I don't know how, but this happened like 5 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, and I was getting messages. I heard about the baby, like, how? But lots of messages, people, my family, all devastated. My partner, devastated as well. I wanted to just be by myself. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I have some friends that used to message every day, till I had to tell them, listen, if I'm dead, you're gonna know. Stop calling me. Stop messaging me. I'm going to be fine. Just give me some space to process things. I remember the day I came home from the hospital, I didn't even walk to my door properly. Somebody showed up by my house. And it was like, oh God, you couldn't have sent me a text. Send me a text. No, I have to stand up with you and talk. What happened to the baby? How you feel? I just really want to go in my bed and shut my door and not see anybody. In the weeks coming, I realized I developed some social anxiety where I did not want to go outside. I did not want to see. I was afraid of seeing people and interacting with people. I wanted to avoid the conversation. So even, I wrote in the book about going to a family function. This is my family. And I'm outside in the car for 20 minutes saying, Gian, open the door and go. Just go. It's your family. They ain't gonna say nothing. Nothing gonna happen. Just go. And I'm talking to myself in my car because I'm just afraid to go and see my family. Time to go to the supermarket. I don't want to go by myself. I'm asking people to go to the supermarket for me because it's just trying to avoid having to tell people that this is what has happened. And not wanting to deal with the reaction and the questions and the God knows best and the everything happens for a reason. And I kind of felt like, you know, I could really tell people what's on my mind. Nobody gonna abuse me back in this moment. But it is such a emotionally intense period that you just really don't know how to function. And can I say that I got 3 weeks sick leave and had to go back to work. So having to go back to work, you know, I was honest. I was at work watching YouTube. Like, you can't expect me to do anything serious. My mind was not there. I couldn't function. I was in pain. Mentally, you just feel off. Your body feels strange. It's just a lot of emotions. And dealing with that was quite difficult. But after a while, you know, I'm grateful that I have a partner that was really encouraging me to talk and trying to get me to say what I was feeling, because I am usually a very vocal person, but I was shutting down. But he wouldn't. Jan, what happened to you? Jan, what do you need? Jan, what can I do? And going through this process, so it was difficult. Spiritually, I was very angry at God. Kept trying to figure out why somebody like me, who is physically, financially, emotionally, every kind of ready to welcome a child, is having this problem, when people who struggling and don't want children just chewing gum and getting pregnant. And it's an angering, frustrating feeling, and having to deal with those emotions as well from a spiritual perspective, and not understanding, you know, why God would let this happen to me. And then, like I said, God knows best, and everything happens for a reason. Like, I beg of you all, please don't tell nobody that. You think it, and it comes to a point where you recognize that it's true, that yes, God knows best, and yes, everything can happen for a reason. But in the immediate aftermath of a miscarriage or some sort of pregnancy loss, please do not tell anybody that, because they cannot see the best, they cannot see the good. It feels disrespectful. It feels like you're disregarding the fact that they had a child. How can you tell me that my child, the best thing to happen to me was for my child to die? That's how it comes across. So please avoid telling people things like everything happens for a reason and God knows best. If you are a spiritual person or religious person, just pray for the person. You don't have to tell them that you're praying for them. You don't have to share. Come, let me pray with you. Don't encroach yourself on people in this. I would say the first 6 months, especially, the only thing you need to be asking people about is, how can I help you? I am so sorry this happened to you. What can I do, if anything, to make your life a little better in this moment? Don't try to fix it. You cannot fix it. You cannot say anything that is could possibly make her feel better. And I had a lot of friends that said that to me, like, oh, I didn't know what to say because I didn't know what to do to make you feel better. Well, who are you to think you could come up with this magical mixture of words that are going to erase the pain of me losing my child? You cannot do it. Get over yourself, and it's not about you. So it really is for you to just, the only thing friends and family can do, in my opinion, is just show that you are available if that person needs you. So if that means you could cook on Mondays, tell them that if you feel tired and you need a break, I will cook for you on Mondays. Just try to make the person's life a little better. You cannot possibly say anything that will make her feel better. You can say a lot of things that will make her feel worse. But the thing to do, in my opinion, I did not like it when I had friends telling me I didn't know what to say to you, so I said nothing. Because it adds that element, it puts pressure on me now to have to figure out if you know. So now I have to go message you and tell you, oh, I have to go type it, I lost the baby, because you're my friend and I want you to know that this is happening to me. And you're going to respond to me, yes, I didn't know, but I didn't know what to say. I cannot tell you how angry that made me. So that's something that I would really encourage. Do not stay away from your friends, not stay away from your family. Do not act like it didn't happen. Don't just, go back to your regular life like she just lose a whole child and you're gonna not say anything. It really, for me, and that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, because I heard that so much. I don't know what to say. You don't know what to say because you're trying to sound perfect. You cannot sound perfect. It's impossible. So all you have to say is, I am sorry this happened to you. How can I help you? But I feel like that's not the question you asked me. But when I start talking about these things, it always ends up there. But ultimately, that from my experience, and essentially why the book came about as well, I just felt like we don't talk about these things. And so many people want to abuse you back, but they respect you too much. And they love you too much, and they know that you're not going to take it well, so they're going to swallow it. But I wrote the book for you to read it for yourself, and hopefully you could understand exactly what to say, what to do, to support somebody who has had pregnancy loss, and also for the people who have had pregnancy loss, things to say to them as well.
Jan, thank you so much. Let's give her a clap. And the importance of acknowledging grief. I mean, it's a death in the family. It's a grief that needs to be recognized and acknowledged. Dillian, was there anything that people said to you that angered you, like Jihan, that made you feel upset? Was there anything that anyone said or did that helped in the months and days and even in the years, even now?
Not now, because I have two beautiful daughters of my own. But yeah, the words weren't kind at all to me. They would say, "Don't worry, God's plan. It's in God's hands," and they would say, "It's not God's timing." And they would say also, "Hurry up and go back, hurry up," and think that is encouraging. That is not encouraging. Try again, And also, they would say, "Your husband have two already. You need your own." People, no, that's not it. So please be kind. You just don't know. You just don't know what persons are going through, and mental health is an issue, and it can lead to that. It can lead to a lot of suicidal thoughts, because I had them, thinking that I can't go on, and, what my body is doing, I don't understand. And, I just tried to understand what I was going through. I did a lot of research. I prayed, but sometimes persons would try to encourage you. I got a lot of encouragement from family, friends, my church family at the time, pastors. But what I felt, I didn't want to be consoled at that time. I wanted to feel all the hurt. I wanted to be in that hole for a while, because the emptiness after losing the baby, it was overwhelming, and I just wanted it to be filled with something, and the only thing that was sure was hurt and pain. So I just, I kept inside. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't go to church. And, I just wanted to keep the hurt for myself. I don't know if you would understand, but that's what I was feeling and how I felt. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, we've spoken about how miscarriage doesn't only impact the women, it also impacts the partners, the men in our lives. How did both of you see this impact on your partners, and how was their reaction in the time leading after? How did this impact their mental health, their spiritual health, their physical health?
For me, my partner turned into, I think he felt like he had to be Superman, and I think most men would have that reaction, wanting to make sure that everything was good. Lots of people would come to him to ask him how I was doing, but he had the same sort of reactions where sometimes I would just look at him just staring off, and I ask him what was wrong, and he would say, like, I don't understand what happened. I don't understand, and everything was going good. Or when my baby died, he was like, part of his lip was kind of pulled in, and like I do that myself. And he was like, sometimes he would say, I just seen him with his lip pulled in. And when he sees me doing that, he says, you're making me think about the baby and stuff like that. So we really have to acknowledge that the fathers grieve too. And they just don't have the physical pain, but they have every other sense of the pain. And it's really, I really wanted to invite a man who has been through the miscarriage experience, but it's a struggle getting men to talk publicly. But I just want to say, on behalf of men, the men and the fathers of miscarriage, they grieve too, and they hurt too. So don't just ask him how she is doing, ask him how he is doing. Give him space to share how he's feeling as well, because oftentimes they might not want to come to us because they don't want us to get upset. So, this is where they may, find solace in friends or other places. So it's really important that we pay attention to the pain of the fathers as well, and not just the fathers, but just the family as well. My family was devastated. My close friends were devastated. Everybody was looking forward to this child, like Jihan finally come off the mat. So it was a big deal for us. So for it to happen so suddenly and so tragically, it just really rocked us all. So it's not just about the pain of the woman who had the actual pregnancy loss, but also about the people around her as well.
When I look back, I thought I was very selfish because I didn't take into consideration his feelings. I felt I was the one who carried the child. I was the one who felt the kicks, the movements. Yes, we both heard the heartbeats, but only because. But he was my pillar. He helped me along the way. And I just want to say thank you to him. I'm so grateful that he was by my side when he saw that I was going into this hole. He kept on, encouraging me and making sure that I'm okay. And I give him great props for that.
Let's lift up the men who are there in our lives.
Joy, just quickly, I would say we have to also acknowledge that people don't grieve the same. So I have had to apologize for arguing, because getting upset, like, why are you not crying? You're not crying. And I always remember he told me, if I break down and you break down, how are we actually going to survive? But we have to recognize people grieve differently as well. So, don't get mad at the men for not crying. I have to say that now, and because I've had to apologize for it as well.
Definitely. All right, now, coping with your loss. You've talked a lot about, some of the things that people said that made you upset. What are some of the things that helped? And, we have our doctor and our counselor here with us. What are some things that you wish were present that could have helped you cope better, or could help women out there cope?
This one is what I wish was present. This one is straight at the heart of the public health institutions. I wish that I knew more about pregnancy loss. I didn't know anything about pregnancy loss before I got pregnant. It feels like it's like this type of information that you're only able to access until it happens to you. But there's emphasis on pregnancy, and I've seen, especially here in Nevis, I know there's work being done about like a pregnancy manual and things that mothers who are expectant mothers should know. But nobody tells you about pregnancy loss. I didn't know if I was bleeding, that I should have gone straight to the hospital. I did not know this. I went to my doctor's office. He told me, go directly to the hospital. Nobody tells you this. Nobody tells you that you're not supposed to bleed. Bleeding is a sign. People don't tell you what to expect afterwards. The pain afterwards. Like, nobody talks about this stuff, and you just go through it and you Googling like you're stupid, because there's nowhere for you to get this kind of information locally. So here am I, probably a scholar in what happens in the UK and Canada and the US now, because nothing really is there for us locally. So I think that's something that we need to work on. Since I released the book, I've heard so many graphic, disappointing stories about things nurses said, things doctors said, reactions from the hospital. Whew, boy, oh boy, we need help. We need help. And a very big thing for me, and I think Dr. Stones mentioned it in terms of, this whole concept of before 28 weeks and after 28 weeks. That is such a stupid, worthless, nonsensical, useless piece of garbage, and I have no reason to censor myself. And I know that a lot of it is emotional as well, because I have no reason to think academically or think from a political or economic perspective. A woman who goes through pregnancy is a mother. She loses a child, and for you to tell her that she didn't make it past 28 weeks as if she made a choice, like, I'm ain't going no more. Like it's a choice. It's a heart-wrenching, cold, heartless pronunciation on the value of her child and her own life. And as a result of that policy, which I understand might not be the case in Nevis, had I been pregnant 10 more days, I would have been able to bury my son. I did not have that option. So my son had to be sent to the incinerator. And they told me that. 10 more days and I would have gotten the option to bury my son, because I would have made it to the wonderful 28-week mark. What is the purpose? Why should I be deprived of that closure because of some stupid policy? It really is a hurtful, cold, ooh, this one gets to me because it bothers me. It bothers me, and I don't think the people who are responsible for policy in public health institutions recognize that you contribute to the trauma of the experience by insisting on this marker of 28 weeks. It is traumatic, and you add to it, and you should be ashamed. But in terms of what helped, I enlisted the help of a counselor very early because I was afraid of what I was feeling. I was afraid of the fact that I was afraid. Like I supermarket. I was afraid. And so I enlisted the help of a counselor very early who walked me through what I was feeling, and I really credit her for why she saved me. I cannot, I think that was the beginning of a healing process for me, speaking with a professional, which is why I insisted that everybody got a list of mental health professionals when you entered here today. And I'll probably post it on my social media tomorrow so that people who might be watching on the stream, if you're looking for it. But it's a list of counselors. The list is prepared by the Mental Health Association. I know sometimes people see it and say, oh, this person isn't here. I know this person. I am not the one responsible for the list. But of course, if you want to talk to somebody and you feel like maybe your family or your friends are not as supportive, there are professionals who know and are trained to help you. And I can tell you that is by far the biggest help that I got in terms of healing. And you think like, how is talking to somebody going to help you? But it really helps you to reframe the way you think about it. It helps you to put things into perspective. The example I like to use is like Christmas lights. You know, like you'd spend your time putting these Christmas lights in a box, making sure, and then when you take them out next year, everything tangle up, just a hot mess. I think that my counselor helped me to untangle my lights. And then when your lights are untangled, you can move forward with other things. So after that, I went back to church. After that, I started writing more and talking more and things of that nature. So I would highly recommend speaking with professionals. I know Stevie works at the counseling unit here in Nevis. There is help available, so I would strongly, strongly recommend that.
For me, I had to learn to re-love myself. Re-love my body, even though it was going through all these situations and the experiences. I had to meditate a lot, you know, and talk to myself, read scriptures, encouraging scriptures, and also, you know, talk to persons who would be close to you. That, you know, those persons who wouldn't go out and talk your business and say, like, yeah, you know, what did you tell me this? No, you talk to someone who you can trust, you know, who you can rely on, someone who you could tell all your feelings and your hurts to.
All right, and this list of mental health numbers, we'll make sure that it's posted under the live feed. We'll make sure that it's on the Department of Health and Gender Affairs page as well, so that it's easily accessible to anybody who's listening out there. So Dr. Stones and Mrs. Byron, you've heard a bit of the story. And, well, Dr. Stone specifically, I know that you're fairly new to Nevis, but you've worked around the world with women who are suffering from miscarriage and pregnancy loss. Are there any recommendations, Dr. Stones, that you would have for us here in Nevis in terms of improving our public health system, in terms of making sure that no mother has to suffer, what Gian went through, that she couldn't even bury her son? What can we do here in Nevis to highlight this?
Thanks, Joy. I think of all the sections in your book, Jihan, I think that section with the way you described those experiences, I just found that so powerful. And thank you for sharing that. Sorry. Sorry, do you mind?
Sure. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not often the doctor gets emotional. Right?
Thank you.
So I actually did a bit of homework in the run-up to this evening because I thought this topic might well come up, because if you do read the book and you read the account, I mean, it's very, very powerful. I'm sorry to say that the scenario locally is pretty much the same as it is across the Narrows in terms of arrangements. And I was looking at some of the reasons for this, and I haven't got the complete story, and others who, especially persons in the administration or with a legal perspective, might have better knowledge than myself. But I think what we're dealing with here really is the, if you like, the gravitational pull of administrative procedures. And the point about the 28 weeks is that it's from 28 weeks that a death certificate can be issued, and this is. I couldn't find a law that says that.
There is no.
But it's custom and practice with regard to civil and vital registration. And I think the Federation is not alone in having that sort of system. So in the UK, you can be issued with a stillbirth certificate from, I think it is from 28 weeks.
24.
Is it 24? But anyway, that's an administrative thing. So the question is, okay, if I have a certificate or I don't have a certificate, does that affect burial? And again, I had a little conversation with one of the local funeral directors, and essentially for a burial, a certificate is required. And I think it's a question, I think, for us, and perhaps it's a topic for a kind of, interested persons in their interaction with the administration, with the hospital, perhaps hospital administration, or the registrar of births, marriages and deaths, to whether there might be some process that could be gone through the issuance of some, not necessarily a certificate, but some kind of medical statement of what's happened, which might then allow a burial. Because as far as I'm aware, I looked at the Cemeteries Act 2017, which doesn't say anything about any gestational limit or etc.
Can I add here? I've researched this extensively because
I thought you might have done.
It bothers me dearly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. We have legislation that says no one can be buried unless they have a birth certificate. That's fine. But the policy is somebody could simply sign a document that says, they don't have to go to Parliament, they could sign a policy document that says, we will issue birth certificates.
When you say birth certificate, you mean death certificate?
A death certificate. Well, a death certificate, well, I guess you need a birth and a death. That's administrative that you could work out. But essentially, it simply is that there's a policy that says you cannot get that certificate until the 28-week mark. And there's the justification that I've been told for that is because medically it is believed that the child can survive on its own without the mother at the 28-week mark. But the bond between a mother and a child does not start at 28 weeks.
I mean, that's not medically correct.
So,
of course, there are many babies that have been born at 26 weeks and
exactly, because
are now walking and talking and going to university.
It's 28 weeks here.
Yeah.
I've found out that it's 20 in the US, 24 in Jamaica, 24 in the UK. 28 is the latest marker, and that's the one that we adopt. But all it will require is a policy change for for our parliamentarians who are soon to be in the throes of elections and trying to get people's votes. That is a policy direction that you can consider, asking to allow persons at least the option, because not everybody might want to bury their child. But if you have the option, at least allow people that.
Yeah, so policymakers
It's a
here in the
policy,
room and
not a-
listening,
not a
please. All right, so Dr. Stones, just briefly as well, now you've touched on this specific issue, but in general, I've heard that there isn't enough to educate about pregnancy loss. What can we do here in public health to change that? What programs have been done well elsewhere that we can use here?
I think it's maybe probably the most useful thing is things around preparation, childbirth preparation, or antenatal classes might be the way to go. And I mean, it's often a difficult balance to strike in that you don't want to terrify people who are just having a baby and say, well, this can happen, and this can happen, and this can happen, etc. And again, I think different persons have different wishes. I mean, some people don't want to know, or etc. Most people do want to know, you know, in general terms. They don't necessarily want a medical encyclopedia. So I think you mentioned, I think, Jihan, the point about danger signs, and that is, I think, I mean, that globally, that's very much a focus for childbirth education, and you know, what are the danger signs that I need to be aware of, and what actions should I take? So I think one can convey that in a sympathetic way in the context of antenatal classes. And to me, that's probably the single most useful and important thing. And then, of course, there'll be individuals who want to go into certain things in a lot more detail. And then, but as we've been emphasising, I think the knowledge is very protective. And I think we also need to have a slightly critical view about, okay, there are certain things that we do which don't necessarily have a really strong scientific basis, and I think so you highlighted some of them from your experience, Jihan, in the book, and I think we need to be encouraging women to question things and say, well, why are we doing this? And you know, do we really need to do that?
Yes, definitely.
And it's not that, you know, everything is set in stone. Stone's pun. You know, it's okay to question things, and it should be, in fact, encouraged. And it's not seen as an insult to the staff, or, you know, who are you to be asking me these difficult questions? So I think that culture of openness and questioning is probably something that people might find. I know, again, some people find that almost, you know, they kind of like the idea that the doctor or the midwife knows, and we should just do what they say, and some people find that reassuring. And actually, in any medical setting, when I need treatment, I just want the doctor to tell me what to do. I actually don't want to know the details. But that's my kind of psychology, and of course,
I think when Jihan said the word options, I think the provision of those options are really important.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stones. Now, aside from the medical, the psychological is so important. So, Mrs. Byron, do you recommend counseling, or what type of counseling would you recommend for women who are suffering with ongoing infertility or have been through, you know, this traumatic experience of pregnancy loss?
The psychological aspect of this experience for women and their partners, men as well, it's very difficult, it's very trying, and it's important that we as a society recognize that mentally and emotionally it's a battle. It is a roller coaster. For instance, mentally, an individual who has experienced a miscarriage, she may be asking herself what she could have done differently. Why did this happen to me? Self-blame is big in terms of an individual who has lost a pregnancy. And it's so important that we recognize that you may see them at the store or in town and they look fine, and they're battling intrusive thoughts. Perhaps they have a flashback of the moment they experienced that pregnancy loss. Perhaps they're battling negative thoughts about their body, about their relationship, and just questioning themselves in terms of what they can do. So mentally, it is a struggle. And that mental struggle manifests itself emotionally and physiologically as well. Emotionally, grief is very real for both that female that experienced that miscarriage and the partner. It's very important that we recognize the impact of that miscarriage on the relationship. Now, men and women, individuals grieve differently. Generally, men and women have general differences. For instance, men may not want to talk about it, and they may not want to verbalize their feelings, whereas women are more open to talking about it, or they may be more willing to express themselves through tears, whereas men express themselves through anger. So I've experienced individuals who may come into the counseling setting for a particular presenting concern. It could be anger, men. And then when you delve into it, they have suffered a loss, a baby that they hoped for. And they're basically presenting anger. And that's their way of trying to manage the grief that they're experiencing. So psychologically, it is definitely a battle for that female and their partner. As a society, we have certain cultural expectations. Early on, you encourage women to have children, and men feel really empowered and beat their chest when they have children. They feel good. And that's something that they definitely want to have and want to show off, so to say. And when that doesn't happen or happen in the time that they hope for, they start getting those questions. And then they start wondering, okay, well, what's going on? What's happening with me? So it's a struggle mentally, emotionally, and counseling definitely is a space in which individuals can explore their emotions and find ways to better manage and express those emotions.
Now, how would you encourage more people to come to counseling?
Okay, we do live in a small island, and culturally you are told, don't tell nobody your business, keep your business to yourself, keep family business inside. And some individuals, they have fears that others may basically just talk about their issues uncaringly. So some individuals see confidentiality as an issue here. And the fact is, we do have confidential professionals here in Nevis that you can speak with. So you can step into the counseling setting with individuals that will be confidential, that will be non-judgmental, and will basically provide the best support that can help you and your partner through this period. So you have the care unit, also known as the counseling unit. You also have individuals like Miss Jasmine Brown. She's a private counselor and she's confidential and will do an excellent job. You have the mental health unit. So we have resources here on the island that are available and that are confidential and that produce results and that will help you through this period.
Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're nearing the end of our panel discussion. You've been an excellent audience. Now, I just want to remind everyone, the whole reason that we are here is because of this incredible and very powerful woman sitting next to me who has authored a book. And let's please give her a round of applause. Can I borrow the book? Okay, so her book, Lifting the Weight of Miscarriage, by Jeanne Williams, and it is a Bouncing Daughters production. That is the name of her publishing house. So I'm just going to ask her a few questions about, the process of writing this book. So, Jeanne, why did you decide to write it, and how have people responded to this raw and open story?
The book started because I got tired of saying the same thing over and over. And I just realized that with the amount of people who kept saying that they don't know what to say, there was obviously a gap in our literature or resources that perhaps needed that voice. I am very big on producing Caribbean material by Caribbean people, for Caribbean people. And so I wanted us to hear our own, I want us to start talking. I don't want us to always have to resort to Google and US and Canada and UK for help when so many of us have gone through this and have coped with this and have actually healed from this. So why can't we help one another? The feedback has been really, really encouraging and validating because, you know, at one point I kind of felt like I was alone, but the amount of people who've come up to me and whispered in my ear that I lost 3, I lost 2. Yesterday somebody told me they lost 9. Like, and these people are walking around you and acting hi and happy and smiling, and they have this immense pain beneath the surface. So I want us to have those kind of conversations and realize that it is not as uncommon as we think, and for people who suffer it to realize that they're not alone. I did not know Delian before this, and look how similar our stories are. And there's probably even somebody in every woman's life who has been through this, and you don't know about it. Yeah. So this is my way of giving people a platform to jump off of that, to have that conversation and start these conversations and challenge our administrations and guide our families and help our relationships in the only way that I really know how to comfortably express myself, which is through writing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time here. We're about to open it up for questions. To my panelists, Dr. Stones, Mrs. Byron, Gian and Dillian, thank you so much. Please let's give them a big round of applause. At this point, I'd actually like to ask NNC if they can stop recording so that we can have a safe space in here. If there might be a question you want to ask, but you don't want to go on the television. So if that's okay, I'd like us to...
If we're going to stop, at least allow me to thank the Ministry of Health and Gender Affairs for partnering with on this initiative. They were so willing and able and so enthusiastic and helpful in the process. So thank you, Latoya and Sheila and Nadine and all of the persons at the ministry who helped to make this event possible. Thank you to NEPAC, thank you to NTV, thank you to the panelists, of course. I enjoyed listening to each of you, and I'm happy of the universality of healing and the fact that you, from different experiences, people are saying the same thing, that healing is possible. So before we close off in that way, I would love to say thank you to all those people. And for more persons who are interested in the book, Lifting the Weight of Miscarriage, it's available on Amazon.com. In ebook format and hard copy as well. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Gian A. Williams, and my personal website is gianwilliams.com. So there are lots of ways to connect with me. I would love to take this conversation further in different places, as many places that would have me, and there's one in the works right now. So let's really have those conversations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.